Tuesday edition of Morning Live. It is so good to have you with us. Thanks so much for tuning in. All right, let's take a look at Oxfam now. It launched its inequality report in Braamfontein, Johannesburg yesterday. The report, which focuses on private wealth versus public good, is launched ahead of this year's annual meeting of the World Economic Forum that's taking place in Davos, Switzerland. In fact, it starts today. The global report is not localized to South Africa, but does include stats from the SADC region, including South Africa. Findings are that the number of billionaires has doubled since the financial crisis, and their fortunes continue to grow by $2.5 billion a day. Yet, the super rich and corporations are paying lower taxes or lower rates of tax than they have in decades. Even worse, the rich hide their monies to evade tax. In Africa alone, as much as 30% of private wealth may be held offshore, denying governments $15 billion in revenue. Basani Baloyi, an Oxfam SA Fellow on Research and Policy, is here in studio with us to unpack the report and help us understand where South Africa stands. Good to have you. Thanks so very, very much for coming in, Basani.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, whenever it's the World Economic Forum time and this report comes out, I always sort of get a little bit shocked by it. But
Absolutely.
I suppose, I don't know why, because every year it seems to be getting more and more. That gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider and wider and bigger. Why? What do we attribute to it?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And in South Africa, of course, it is obviously as the most unequal society in the world. We are seen as the symbol of this, right? And what we are attributing to this, is the fact that, we have public services that are just not functioning. And what we find in our report is that if we get the money that is required to pump into our public services, it will create the equal opportunities for everyone to contribute into the society. As they should. And basically, that is one of many key measures that needs to be taken to reduce the state of inequality and poverty in this country. However, what we are finding is that government is fueling this crisis by undertaxing the wealthy.
Okay.
Of their fair share of taxes. And of course, we know that there's also tax dodging, as you've just alluded to in your opening. And if we get this right, it means that we can actually save lives. We can ensure that, women are freed of the burden of having to take care of those who are dying because the healthcare system is not functioning. Right? And so they can also contribute into the economy.
Yeah. I want to get an understanding, though. We gave the number out there that their fortunes, and we're talking about billionaires, the number of billionaires has doubled since the financial crisis. And they earn a fortune of $2.5 billion a day.
A day.
How does this happen? Educate me, because I would love to know. How do they get their fortunes to grow at a rate like this?
Well, this is the issue, is the fact that they are not being taxed in the way in which they should be taxed.
Mostly attributed to tax.
Mostly attributed to tax. So what we found is that about in 1990, corporate rates of taxes, the corporate tax, used to be just over 40%. This is the global average, right? And now, in 2018, it is just under 30%. In apartheid South Africa, corporate taxes in this country in 1990 were at 50%. 50%.
And we're sitting now at?
28%.
Okay.
Now
this doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense. How is it that in apartheid South Africa it was 50%, but now it is 28%, right? And then also the personal income tax of the wealthy of this country has also been declining as well. So these are the things that we are seeing. And then, of course, you mentioned the illicit financial flows, right? Meaning that companies are tax dodging, using the tax system to evade and move taxes offshore, income offshore. We are not getting the money that is required then to pump into
essential services.
Essential services, yes.
But let's focus completely on the South African scenario now. We'll branch out. So we say 2.5 billion a day. That's obviously That's a global look. South Africa, what do we look at here in South Africa when we talk about these so-called billionaires, and how fast are they growing? Do we have a lot coming out?
Well, what we have found is that they have also doubled right? From in terms of numbers, I think we saw between 2008 and I have to correct the statistic, but basically they doubled from a number of 4 to 8, right, in 2017. And then what we saw is that, and this is dollar billionaires, right?
Yeah,
this is in dollar terms. And then so they doubled. And they numbered 8 in 2017. They were reduced, however, to 5 in 2018. But what you would expect to find is that their reduction means that the wealth has trickled down to the poor.
Being shared.
But that's not what is happening.
Okay.
There's a trickling up to these very concentrated billionaires, and that trickling up, they increased their wealth by 15%. Sure. That is shocking, right? So we are not doing enough on this account, and we need to be doing more, because basically we are saying to our children that actually you don't deserve a better healthcare system. We are saying to their mothers, we are saying to their fathers, you don't deserve a better healthcare system. We are saying to pensioners, you don't deserve a good pension system. Neither do you deserve the schools that you are in. Right? And we are really cutting our life expectancy. We are not guaranteeing the future of South Africans.
I look at what's happening now, and we can't look at this in isolation to the current affairs that we're living through. I mean, we're sitting and we're seeing what corporate South Africa are actually doing behind the scenes. And let's focus on this for a moment. I mean, we see what the bribery and the corruption and the big suitcases of cash that are being handed out to a handful of government ministers. I mean, these are all allegations, but there's so many of them, it's very hard not to sort of believe that it may be happening somewhere, and it must be. And the reality is when you see this as an individual that does have money, where the money is being so squandered, you'd probably think to yourself, why must I pay my taxes? Why can't I actually just send them offshore? Because it's being squandered anyway here. Let me just send it offshore and not have to worry about paying these taxes that are not going for the benefit of the country. You know, these are a lot of things that go through people's minds. Does that influence as well?
Well, what we are saying in this report is that where you find high rates of inequality is where you'll find corruption. The higher the inequality, that's where you'll find the corruption. Because what is actually happening is that big corporations, right, who basically have a lot of power because they are, they have this power, they are able to influence policy, right, to their favor. And part of that is through, sending their money overseas. So that is an outcome of a process. What you are talking about in terms of illicit financial flows, it's an outcome of a process. And that is of the corruption, right? That is corruption. We cannot think about it in isolation, right? And so what we are saying is that if you have these this inequality, you find that it is perpetuated because of major corporations that are swindling the government, swindling the population, and driving a wedge between the haves and the have-nots. And we need to stop this.
Yeah, it's scary when you say that the higher the inequality, the higher the corruption, and we are the most unequal society in the world. So what does that say about our corruption levels? Are we perhaps the highest in the world? It's just a question I'm asking. But nonetheless, let's look at education, because the report does look at education, and it asserts that education is core to social mobility. Now, our education system is something that has always failed our youth. It's failing the people of South Africa. Talk to us about the quality of education here in South Africa, and what does it show us?
Well, the quality of education, as you have alluded to, is poor. It's actually amongst the poorest in the world. In terms of our literacy rates for those who are in grade 3, many of the children that cannot read, basically, by the time they get to grade 3, grade 4. What we also find is that two-thirds of the children actually leave before matriculating, right? So as you enter the school system, you don't stay, right? And there are many reasons for this. It's not out of choice, okay? It's not something that, we just people would just do, but the education system is clearly failing them. You have, we still have mud schools in our education system. We still have problems in terms of textbooks. We have problems in terms of kids, as you would have heard from our press conference yesterday, who are not taught in their home language and therefore struggle because a lot of the material then they cannot then acquire the basic ways in which literacy functions for them to then acquire English by the time they get to grade 4. Yeah. And this is a continuous struggle. So we haven't actually gotten right the inequities within the classroom that are not just about the school infrastructure in terms of having the buildings that are to ensure that children are there, but how do you keep them there? What kinds of teaching methods are required in order to keep children, acquiring the knowledge that they need to acquire, so that they can actually matriculate.
I mean, I know that education is the issue, and I think
health.
And health is the next one I was going to touch on, because I imagine it's the same scenario.
Definitely, it is the same scenario. Currently, what we have in South Africa is the fact that, nearly 50% of the national budget goes to funds the private healthcare system that only caters to 8.2 million of the population, right? The other 50% is meant to cater to 42 million of the population. That is a gross inequity right there. Yeah. And so how do you expect that, we are to get the medicines that are required in the public healthcare system, right? How do you expect that we are to get the doctors that are required in the medical system? About 2 years ago, when I was a student, right, I didn't have medical aid, basically, right? I went to a public facility, and you have to be there at like 5 o'clock in the morning. You're given a ticket. There are queues outside. This is in Witkoppen, the Witkoppen Clinic. There are queues outside, and and I had to see a gynae. Luckily, the gynae was there. There was only one, serving hundreds of people, right? You walk through a corridor, and there are people suffering from all forms of disease. Through a corridor, many people are there, and there are only 3 doctors that are to cater.
That are seen to everybody.
And it's about a lottery.
Yeah.
This is the system that we have. It's a lottery, because that ticket maybe you'll be able to see the doctor today, or maybe you're not. But when you walk to Mill Park Hospital, or you walk to any of the private clinics, you will be guaranteed that there will be a doctor that is there to take care of you. Yeah. How is it that in this country we have nearly half of the budget catering to 8.2 million of the people of this land, and another half catering to the vast majority of it? It just makes no sense. What are we going to do about this? Yeah. Right?
It's a big question, and it's a question, like I say, we ask every single time this year, and the situation always gets worse, never better. Basani Beloy, Global Report, talking to us about the Global Report on stats, including the SADC region and South Africa. I imagine go on to the Oxfam website. You will find the full report there.
Absolutely.
It was released yesterday. Have a look at it, and you can be more shocked as you read some of those statistics. Let's take a break. When we return,